It was a typical winter day in Washington, D.C., one of those brisk afternoons where the frost seemed to bite at your skin, and the holiday lights gleamed on every corner. The city was alive with the buzz of festive shopping tourists, taking in the sights and the hum of the holiday season. But amidst all this, one thing remained constant: the undeniable presence of power that could be felt through the streets as the former president's motorcade, known as the Beast, glided through the avenues. Former President Donald Trump had long become an icon, a symbol of controversy, wealth, and influence, whether he was actively involved in politics or not. His reputation commanded attention as the black Cadillac, one flanked by an array of SUVs and police vehicles, rolled toward the Trump Tower. The city parted ways as if to make room for this symbol of power. The air was thick with tension, but not from fear. No, it was something else. It was the weight of history that walked beside him. The streets were lined with onlookers, some snapping pictures, some simply staring for all the spectacle. Though the eyes of the former president remained focused on the road ahead, until his attention was caught by something that stopped him in his tracks. Up ahead, just outside a street vendor cart selling hot chocolate and pretzels, was a woman sitting on the ground wrapped in a thin blanket. Beside her, a small girl no older than 6 clutched a tattered teddy bear, her gaze darting up and down at the passing cars and pedestrians. They were a stark contrast to the polished world around them. The woman's eyes, hollow with exhaustion, avoided the gazes of others, as if resigned to the invisibility that often comes with life on the streets. Her clothes were ragged, her hair unkempt. The child, too young to understand the full weight of their circumstances, simply looked up at the world around her. Trying to make sense of it for a moment, the world felt suspended, as if time itself held its breath. Trump, who had navigated some of the most challenging and high-stakes moments of his life, could not tear his eyes away. There was something raw about the sight of these two souls, vulnerable, neglected by the city, by the system, by society at large. And then something inside him shifted without any thought, without hesitation. Trump pressed the button on the intercom that signaled the driver to stop. The driver, a seasoned Secret Service agent who had worked with the former president for years, immediately eyed slowing the motorcade to a halt. The convoy followed suit, its engines idling in the cold air. "Stop here," Trump ordered. The moment the car stopped, the usual flurry of activity surrounding the motorcade began. Secret Service agents jumped out of their vehicles, scanning the surroundings, their eyes darting across the street in search of threats. But Trump, as always, stood his ground. He calmly opened the door of the Cadillac one and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The sharp winter air stung his face, but it didn't seem to bother him. His gaze never wavered from the woman and the child. There was something in his eyes now, an intensity that came from deep within. The agents remained frozen, unsure of what was happening. Was this an impromptu public appearance? Was something about to go terribly wrong? They had been revved for 1,000 different scenarios, but this was not one of them. Trump's steps were measured, and as he approached the woman and child, the street around him seemed to quiet the onlookers too. Pause, sensing something extraordinary unfolding in front of them. The woman, Sarah, looked up slowly. Her body stiffened with surprise as she realized who was standing in front of her. The former president, the billionaire businessman, Donald Trump, a man she had seen on television but never imagined would be standing before her in such an intimate moment. "Hello," Trump said softly. His voice was calm and unhurried, his eyes locked on hers, filled with an unusual gentleness that surprised even him. He wasn't used to looking at people like this. Really looking, it was as though he was trying to understand their pain, their story. Sarah could hardly believe it. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She had always known that people like Trump existed, those who had everything the world had to offer. But it was the first time she had ever been in their direct presence. She didn't know how to react, how to address him. It was surreal. Trump took a step closer, glancing at the little girl Lily, who was watching him carefully, her fingers clutching her teddy bear so tightly that her knuckles were white. "Hi there," Trump said. Crouching down to the girl's level, his large frame seemed out of place in the cramped space of the sidewalk, but he bent down as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "What's your name?" Lily blinked at him for a long moment, unsure of whether to answer. Sarah's hand instinctively reached for Lily, giving her a comforting squeeze. The small child finally spoke, her voice small but clear. "I'm Lily Trump," smiled, his gaze softening. He wasn't used to this kind of interaction. His life had been filled with high-powered meetings, boardrooms, and debates, but here with this little girl, something about the in her voice and the vulnerability in her situation made him pause. It made him rethink everything. "Well, Lily," Trump said, "it's nice to meet you. I know it's a little cold out here, huh?" Lily nodded, her eyes darting between her mother and Trump. The situation was so strange to her, this towering figure kneeling before her, talking to her as though she were someone special, not just another child forgotten by the city. Trump turned back to Sarah. "What about you?" "What's your name?" "I'm Sarah," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never thought I'd meet someone like you, sir." "Not like this." Trump took a moment to look at her. Really look at her, and his expression softened. He could see the weariness in her face, the deep lines of struggle, the silent story she carried within her. She was a woman who had lived through unimaginable challenges, a woman who had long ago lost hope that someone might care. And now here she was, in the presence of someone who had everything, yet in this brief moment seemed willing to share something much more important. "You and your daughter," Trump said, his voice tinged with empathy. "You shouldn't be out here like this. No one should." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She hadn't expected to hear those words from him. She had heard politicians speak about homelessness, about the needy, but hearing it from someone with Trump's stature, someone who could change everything with a fell of a finger, felt different. "Real, we lost our home," Sarah explained, her voice trembling. "I lost my job and then everything fell apart. I don't know what to do anymore. I've tried so many times to get help, but it's never enough." Trump looked at her, then at Lily. There was something about the little girl's face that made his heart twist. A child should never have to know what it feels like to be homeless, to be without. He couldn't just walk away from this. He knew that this wasn't a problem to be ignored or passed off on to someone else. "I can help," Trump said firmly. The words came with surprising confidence, as though they were more than just an offer. They were a promise. The agents who had been standing by unsure of how to proceed now moved into action, but Trump held up his hand, signaling them to wait. He turned to Sarah again. "You're going to get the help you need," he said. "I'll make sure of it." He pulled out his phone and began making calls. He wasn't looking for approval, and he wasn't concerned about the optics. What mattered to him now was that Sarah and Lily would have the chance to rebuild their lives within minutes. The agents had located a nearby shelter that could take them in immediately. Trump personally spoke to the shelter's director, ensuring that Sarah and Lily would not just have a place to stay, but also access to food, clothing, and health care. Trump looked back at Sarah, his eyes steely with determination. "Going to be all right," he said with finality, but he didn't stop there. Turning to one of his security team, he made an additional request. "Get her some new clothes, warm clothes and blankets. She shouldn't have to spend another night out in the cold." Within moments, agents made the necessary arrangements while Trump turned to Sarah once more. "You're not alone in this. I'll check it on you. Make sure things are moving forward." Before he left, Trump handed Sarah a thick envelope inside of which was a generous sum of money, far more than Sarah had ever imagined, for you and Lily. He said, "Take care of yourselves. You deserve it." Sarah could hardly speak, still trying to process the enormity of what was happening. This wasn't just charity, it was a lifeline. Trump nodded to her and then, without another word, walked back to his car. The motorcade, which had been halted for this brief moment of humanity, now moved forward once again, leaving behind a stun crowd and a woman whose life had just been irrevocably changed. As the motorcade disappeared down the road, people began to whisper. Some pulled out their phones to capture the moment. Others stood frozen in disbelief. The media would soon be all over the story. But right now there was a silence, one that spoke volumes about the unexpected act of kindness. They had all just witnessed. News of what had happened that day spread like wildfire. The story was everywhere, on television, social media, blogs, and newspapers. People were stunned, shocked by the humanity that had been displayed in the most unlikely of situations. Trump, the billionaire businessman who had always been seen as self-serving, had done something that no one had expected. He had shown empathy, kindness, and generosity, not in a stage photo op, but in a raw, unscripted moment. The world had watched him for years, seen him speak his mind on television, read his controversial tweets, and listened to his political speeches, but no one had ever imagined that the same man who had been the focal point of so much division could also be the one to extend a hand to those most in need. People reacted in many different ways. Some laid Trump's actions, praising him for doing something that many politicians would shy away from. They saw it as a sign that despite his faults, Trump had a human side that was rarely on display. Others, however, remained skeptical, questioning whether the gesture was truly genuine or simply a calculated move to shift public perception. But regardless of the debate, one thing remained clear. Trump's act had changed lives. Sarah and Lily were no longer homeless. Within days, they had moved into a new apartment, and Sarah had found a part-time job. Trump kept his promise. He checked in with her regularly, making sure she had the resources she needed to succeed. As for Trump, the experience stayed with him. It wasn't a moment he could easily forget, and it made him rethink many things. The story of Sarah and Lily didn't just change their lives. It changes too in that fleeting moment of compassion. Something had shifted in Trump, something that he couldn't easily explain. The world would never forget the day Donald Trump, in the midst of his motorcade, stopped everything to help a homeless woman and her daughter. It was a moment of humanity in the most unexpected place, and it reminded everyone that kindness, no matter how small or grand, can have a profound impact. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you even more amazing content.